Well, this camera is like really good and it's actually really affordable. Excited to bring you this video because I have been contemplating switching out my Panasonic gear and going with something that would help me make videos on YouTube here a little bit easier. So I've been called a Panasonic fanboy for a lot of years. I think that's kind of funny because I don't consider myself an anything fanboy. I just like cameras and I like budget cameras, and Panasonics have just been the ones that have fit the bill for me for the longest time. But for me, someone who has been doing YouTube full time now for a little over a year, I've been looking into a camera that could maybe help make my YouTube life a little bit easier. So all the video that you just saw was shot with my new camera. This is actually an older camera and it cost me less than $600. So that's your first clue. Second clue is that it can shoot DCI 4K. It has a log profile. It shoots at over 200 megabits per second in DCI 4K. And the real kicker is that it has really good autofocus. That's a really cool feature that I've not had in any of my Panasonic cameras because unfortunately most Panasonics have had pretty bad autofocus, and that's just one thing that I haven't really held at like a very high value of. Good autofocus is actually really important when you're spending almost your entire time filming yourself. So without any further ado, the camera that I decided to go with is the Olympus EM1 Mark II. And if you're thinking to yourself, an Olympus? Like, I didn't even know they made cameras that shoot video. I mean, I've always known that Olympus's cameras can shoot video. I just didn't really hold them in a very high regard. I do want to say a big thanks to Dave Mays. And when he made a video about the EM1 Mark II, I kind of just wrote it off as like, okay, it's an Olympus camera, like nobody uses those. I started looking into it more and more, and I found out that like the autofocus is basically just like a Sony camera. And that really intrigued me, especially because this is a micro four thirds camera. I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people. Whether it's photography, video, design, Skillshare has thousands of inspiring classes that'll help you gain more knowledge on whatever subject you're interested in. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, so you'll never have to deal with any annoying ads. One Skillshare class I definitely recommend is Film Lighting Made Simple by Dandan Liu. Dandan takes you through the basics of getting beautiful looking imagery achieved through learning the fundamentals of lighting. This class is easy to follow and it'll equip you with all the information you need for lighting your next video. So the really cool thing is that the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description below are gonna get a free trial to Skillshare. So once again, I highly recommend you click that link and get yourself a 1-month free trial. Once again, big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. This camera is pretty old, so obviously you're not gonna be buying it new. This came out around the same time that the original GH5 came out. And so you can get this on eBay for around $600, which is a really good deal. Again, the EM1 Mark II can shoot at DCI 4K at 237 megabits per second, which is lovely to edit with, and you can shoot in either flat or log, as well as a bunch of other basic color profiles. In 1080p, you have the option to shoot in all-eye. This camera also has image stabilization, which works really, really well, and it has all of your necessary assist features. It has your histogram, it has focus peaking, and it has full-time audio meters, which is awesome. You have a mic jack, a headphone jack, an HDMI, and lastly, it has amazing battery life. I have 2 batteries for this EM1 Mark II, and I have never run out of battery shooting all day, so that's awesome. Now let's talk about the cons, because there definitely is some cons with this camera. Not a lot, but there is. First con is there's no 10-bit. Unfortunately, there's no internal 10-bit on the EM1 Mark II, which is a bummer. You do get 8-bit 422 when you put it out into an external recorder, but not the best color depth on this camera. The second con, I'm sorry, is the menus. The menus are really confusing, and coming from someone who's really used to Panasonic and like Blackmagic cameras, it took a while for me to get used to how the menus work. One thing I also don't like is that like if you plug in a mic that doesn't have power, you have have to make sure that the plug-in power is on, otherwise you won't get any audio. So there's just little quirks like that in the menu that just make it really frustrating. Another con is the IBIS isn't great when you're trying to do anything with a wide angle lens. What you're gonna notice is that the edges are gonna be a little bit warpy, kind of like a warp stabilizer effect, which isn't desirable, but the thing that I don't like about IS1 is that it crops into the image. So let me show you. So now we're in IS1 and this is barely wide enough to vlog with. I have it on a GorillaPod and I have my arm stretched out. If you had short arms or if you didn't have a GorillaPod to like stretch your camera out with, this would be unusable. And this is at 12 millimeters, which is typically wide enough on most cameras if you don't have an extra crop. So you just have to decide better image stabilization with a crop or worse image stabilization without a crop. So when it comes to the image that's coming out of this EM1 Mark II, it is a very nice, sharp 4K image. In my opinion, it's a little bit too sharp. It looks very digital and the dynamic range is okay. The highlight roll-off isn't very good. And even with the OM log, you still don't really get that much dynamic range. It actually doesn't look that much different than just using the natural profile and turning all of the contrast and saturation down. If you wanted a little less stale, digital looking image, I would say you should probably invest in some diffusion filters for your lens, something like the Black Pro Mist or the Glimmer Glass, something that'll just take that digital edge off of your footage because this is a very digital and overly sharp looking image. Okay, so real quick, here's a couple extra things that I forgot to mention about this camera. PS, if you made it to this portion of the video, mad props. You're one of the few. You aren't gonna get any high frame rate options. The highest frame rate you can do is 1080p at 60 frames per second. A couple cool things about this camera though is you are gonna be able to set your shutter speed at 1/48th of a second, so you'll get a true 180-degree shutter. And in the playback menu, it's actually gonna show you what picture profile you used on that video clip. So as long as you haven't deleted the videos off your SD card, you can always just put the SD card back in your camera and then it'll actually show you on the playback menu what picture profile you used, which could be really useful. So overall, I really like this EM1 Mark II and I think I might keep it. I'm always on the lookout for the best budget camera, and this EM1 Mark II comes really close. A lot of the things that make this EM1 Mark II so good is that it's been getting a lot of firmware updates, which has been giving it a bunch of really great features like the autofocus. And I think that the one thing that would still hold people back from getting this EM1 Mark II is the fact that it just doesn't have 10-bit. That's the one thing that I think if this camera had 10-bit, it would be the perfect camera. You're getting a Micro Four Thirds camera with really good autofocus, great colors, 4K. Sure, you don't get any high frame rates, but if you're like me and you mostly want a camera that's just a good bread and butter camera that can just do really good talking head stuff like this, have really good autofocus that's dependable, the EM1 Mark II is a great option. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I want to say a big shout out to my buddy Michael Amsel, who did a lot of the B-roll for this video. If you'd like to check out some more of my videos, you can click on either side of me. Like the video if you did, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all next time. Later.